do that last time. And Mr. James, Mark James, who's in my top left, who can do his own intro in a moment, has been working on a startup around augmented reality for the last year or so, a bit longer than that, I think. So is going to talk through that and the industry and how that all could go in the future. A couple of little housekeeping things from me. Obviously, we made a charity contribution last month or month before last, which is really good. So thank you very much for everyone who's paid up. I'm thinking about making September's down the pub instead of a webinar. Interested in your views on that. I think it would be, I know, radical thinking, but I thought it'd be nice just to get a glass of wine in. Yeah, there you go. I've got thumbs up from most. So, so I'll confirm that later on. I just got to talk to the hotel. But back to usual format. And if there's some way I can mix and match Zoom and physical presence, I'll try and do that. So I haven't quite worked out how to do that, but I'll sort that out. The other thing, a bit random, food for thought, you don't need to answer it now. On the 5th of September, myself and Nick Costa Green, who's eating his burgers, so which is why he's not on video, and a few others are thinking about getting together for a Lose the Lockdown Lard bike ride round the harbour. So start at Fareham, ride over to Havant, down so Hayling Island, through Hayling Island, back over on the Eastney Ferry, back on the Gosport Ferry, and then back up to Fareham again, finish off at Cam's Mill for a beer if we can get served there. If anyone's interested, by all means, give us a shout. You know, like I say, I could do with getting back in training, to be honest with you. It's about 30 miles. We're probably going to skip the hills because I can't be asked for that.
Well, get a taxi.
Well, yeah,
sounding better all the time.
On Uber trip, which would be cool. Yeah, so I'll send out a bit more detail. But if anyone's interested, just let us know, and I'll try and get a little gang together, and we'll try and hopefully raise a bit of money for charity if we can do so. Okay. Beyond that, nothing more to report. Mark, do you want to take over from here, mate?
Yeah, happy to. Good evening, everybody. I don't think I know everybody's name. Some of you obviously aren't frequent pub goers after Phil's little shindigs. This might actually be the first one that I've been to and not finished with a drink, which is weird. So let me share my screen and get involved. Hopefully everyone can see screen now. So I suppose to start with, does everybody not know what augmented reality is? Or what have people heard about augmented reality?
I know a little bit, but that's about as far
It's
as
all about Pokemon Go.
A lot of it is about Pokemon Go, actually, yes, funnily enough. Okay, cool. So that's easy. I'll start at the beginning then, I think. Back in the day, there was a guy called Charles Wheatstone who discovered what he called stereopsis, which is to take two plain images and combine them to create a sense of depth. That's how our eyes work, how our brain interprets what we see. And he produced a thing that just basically reflected two images from 90 degrees apart and created a sense of depth. And this was the underpinnings that would lay dormant for about 150 years until someone produced some VR. These were some of the early headsets, which I think are absolutely brilliant. I think actually the bubble helmet on the left, which is Toshiba bubble helmet, I think is probably better because you wouldn't try and cross the road with that. Whereas the modern guys, the Apple guys, you can see they're quite clearly comfortable being outside and not looking where they're going. So I think the old tech was probably a bit better. But you can imagine it was pretty heavy. I don't know if you guys got to have a go at VR back in the late 80s, early 90s, but you could get like a very simple flight sim game. And the key function of VR is that it completely immerses you. So it's sort of aware of all of your pose, all of your turning of your head, and with gloves and other sensors and things like that, it gives you a more immersive experience. And it actually culminated with the Sensorama, which is a brilliant machine, which actually added the first haptic feedback. So the chair vibrates, it had 3D audio, and it had a smell generator as well, which I think is absolutely terrific. It's a tragedy they only made 4 of them, but these were the early experiments. And as we know, there was a bit of a lull after that, where it was difficult to make it something that was consumer affordable, basically. So it took a long time to reach consumers. So extending that technology into augmented reality, we basically add some of those 3D components to what we can already see in the real world. And that obviously adds myriad additional challenges, because for it to be convincing, everything has to line up very nicely. It has to be the right light to match the ambient lighting. It has to have perspective and everything else, which means understanding the scene and the world around you, which is computationally vastly more expensive than being able to just generate a VR environment. And then continuing on from that, the most complex of all is mixed reality, because that brings back the gloves and all the other elements of VR hardware, but again, combining it with the real world, so you can be manipulating a virtual object, perhaps on your tabletop or something like that. So that's the distinction that some people make, but it's still augmented reality in fact. So this was actually a mock-up that some of my colleagues did, which shows you some of the more obvious uses in wayfinding and spatial awareness. It's identified the number 11 bus and figures out where it's going and all those sorts of things. These are the sorts of things that are in development now. These are things you can already do, although it's strictly on the phone at the moment. And that is a different set of challenges, because the phone has, of course, one camera. So understanding the environment is a lot more computationally expensive, and it's a different set of challenges. But everybody has one, so everybody's desperate to find the opportunity. As soon as Google takes it seriously, as soon as Apple gets involved, everybody takes it seriously. So
Mark, in this sort of situation, what's the commercial model to, advertisers, or what why is the question I'm asking? How does it all work?
So I suppose some of it is built on existing models, your local deals, your hotels, those sorts of things. It's an extension of what you can already do with Google Maps and City Mapper and things like that. It's a more immersive way of experiencing that. So for instance, the input, instead of having to actually type in what you're looking for or say what you're looking for, you can just hold it up and it knows where you are. It knows that you're looking at the number 11 bus. It can show you exactly where things are in relation to where you are. And it's a bit more of you've already got the phone out, so now you can hold it up and see where you're going, rather than looking down and it's towards the pavement. It's actually bringing people's attention up, which isn't a bad thing.
But the advertisers are paying, the advertisers will be paying for this sort of space. That's obviously more expensive than a non-augmented reality equivalent, yeah?
It depends. It depends on the use case. Something like this, they won't necessarily know or make the distinction that it's being consumed in AR. They've done what they've done to get a premium placement already. It just so happens that AR is the display technology in use, but they won't necessarily make the distinction. There will be other areas where they will make a distinction, such as if Niantic wanted to install ads, if they wanted to do something like that, because then you know that you've got the demographics of the game, you've got the theme of the game. You don't want to kind of ruin the immersive quality of the game. So you might start thinking about the aesthetic of the advert. If it's a Wizards Unite Harry Potter type game, then you might want to take that theme and make that a part of the ad. So then you get into unique creative for those particular pieces of inventory. But they're also much more difficult to place, because where this is just, in this particular example, it's kind of floating on the screen. The next step is to be able to interact with and replace existing billboards, existing inventory, out of home, your JC to coast and all that sort of stuff. They will want to do something really smart with that inventory, because it's obviously very valuable already. Piccadilly Lights, terrific example, which I'm pleased to say we're working with to try and accomplish something quite exciting there. There's a huge opportunity for out of home. The sides of buses, the sides of bus stops, all that stuff is obviously harder to place accurately, but is all prime real estate, which currently doesn't have a digital ad outlet. So it is, in that sense, new and a different value again. But some of it is existing ads, some of it is existing content, just experienced in a new way.
Okay, tough.
So there's also, because it's new and because it's experiential, there's also a massive premium for, I suppose, what you would call just individual creative projects, one-off creative projects. So in the same way that Coca-Cola do a Christmas ad, which they don't run the rest of the year, they could put an awful lot of resource into something quite experiential that they just run for 6 weeks at a certain time of year, and they'll spend a lot of money on that. And how they place that, how that's consumed can vary. But at the moment, it won't be in-app, so it won't be the kind of model where you're paying the app developer and they make a few quid on CPM. This will be something where they either build an app, and that is partly a limitation of the technology. You know, you need to, it's quite a payload to download and execute, so it almost becomes an app by itself, and you encourage people to experience it just for the sheer joy of doing so, which again is a very different model to finding a cheap hotel or whatever it is. So, yeah. I actually remember what so just a few basic use cases. The other ones we've already discussed. Another one is the museums and galleries. You can just fire off other content from online. You could have audio descriptions. You could pull up information about the artists, you know, the history of the picture. You could pull the layers off and show how it was originally composed. You could do all sorts of really interesting things with artwork and with museums. Wayfinding, which is what we've already touched on. Gaming, which obviously was the first thing mentioned. This is where all the money is at the moment. It's also where all the engagement is at the moment. It's gaming and social, but there's some really exciting things happening. It's getting people outside. It's getting people active. Some of the games actually reward you for that, for the physical activity, for the distance traveled. Minecraft is loads of fun because now you can actually do it on your table or in your garden. It's loads of fun actually. And these are obviously candidates for advertising, but you have to consider things like the aesthetic. Harry Potter being sort of not medieval, but it's got a certain quality to it, which, you know, you can't just dump a Coca-Cola ad in the middle. It's got to be thought out. So that has implications on programmatic, ad networks, the whole piece really. This is actually Snapchat. This is a lot of people's first exposure to augmented reality because it's the selfie version, and there's thousands of filters. You can make your own very easily. This has now been extended. They've got something called landmarkers now, which does the same thing but faces outward again, and it starts building on the Eiffel Tower, Buckingham Palace, all sorts of, you know, major landmarks to do more interesting things. So Game of Thrones actually did a launch piece on Flatiron Building in New York, where a dragon comes down and just lands on the building, and it's just quite a thing to watch. But you can use those landmarkers to do other things in the same way that you can model things around a face or around the hands, that sort of thing. And similarly, there's a lot of people that are using murals as a trigger point, and they're actually adding a digital dimension to their installations and their artwork, which you then experience by visiting, but then bringing your phone out and seeing what else lies behind it. And that can be three-dimensional, it can be animated, it can include audio and all that sort of stuff. So it's adding another dimension to artwork, and especially when they're trying to beautify parts of London and things like that. There's quite a few artists who are actually being commissioned specifically to do installations that include an AR piece, which again is quite cool. In industry, we're seeing a lot with architecture, new developers, planners, that sort of thing. They can do mock-ups that are a bit more tactile than an artist's impression. You can see how it will block a view. You can see how it will keep with the aesthetic of the area. They're using it early on in planning, but they're also letting other people come in, so you could see what they want to do with St Catherine's Dock from the other side of the water. Just look south and see what it's going to look like in 10 years from now. Lots and lots of applications in diagnostics and manuals, simulations, that sort of thing. That's where most of the hardware money is currently being spent, in fact. So lots still to do, but there's some really interesting applications in industry. Retail is huge and is more than just a gimmick. I say that because it seems odd that you would try on shoes virtually, but actually they've discovered that as long as it's well calibrated, they can measure your foot and then recommend within half a size, which has actually reduced the level of returns and therefore reduced cost. So they're actually getting return on investment with what appears to be quite a silly little app. And similarly with furniture, if it's got the right scale, it can put it in life size, and you'll see if it really fits and tweak the colors and all those sorts of things. So it's really adding value to the retail process as well, and blurring the lines between bricks and mortar and e-commerce, because obviously there's still plenty of retailers have both, and what they want to do is still produce value from their bricks and mortar. So they're trying to create more of an experience when you go to the store, and AR is going to help with that, I think. So there's quite a few little interesting things people are playing with. So that's what we're doing with phones right now. I don't know if anybody wants any questions. Do you want to have a quick break for that? No?
I'm guessing all this is very much dependent on the quality of the camera, yeah?
Yes, hugely. And processing power, it's, every generation improves. We're now seeing generations of phone with 2 cameras to improve depth perception. We've got, I think the latest iPad Pro actually has a LiDAR scanner on the back of it as well.
What's that?
So it's basically a laser version of radar for range detection. So it's how you would do 3D scanning of buildings and stuff from a drone.
Yeah.
Smaller version of that, a personal 3D point cloud generator.
My God.
Just for understanding the environment and doing it, moving the work to the hardware rather than the software, because there is only so much a phone can do. And it is worth mentioning that a lot of these games, they'll burn. I mean, I've got an S9, S10, and I'll smoke a battery in 40 minutes from full by playing an AR game. It's computationally very expensive. And the more we can push the hardware, the better. So going almost full circle, we go back to the wearables, and on the left, this is a Google Glass and something called Vusiv, which they're trying to go for an all-day wear. So they're trying to produce utility value for you to just wear it all the time, which I think personally is a bit of a long shot. On the right-hand side, we have got Magic Leap and HoloLens. And they're bigger bits of hardware. I think they're going to have brilliant industrial applications, brilliant gaming applications, but you're going to put those on for an hour and then put them away. You're not going to wear those every day. And I think this is a much more realistic outcome, certainly the next few years. And in the middle is the Solos, which is actually kind of halfway between the two. It looks almost like a good pair of Oakleys, and is being used by cyclists. And it mostly just provides simple telemetry, speed, cadence, your run time and everything else. There's also a set of swimming goggles, does the same thing. Again, that's pretty cool. You don't have to take your head out of the water and look at the clock. It can give you lap times and stuff like that. Relatively straightforward, much more lightweight. They don't have to connect to phones to do the work, where some of them, they tether to the phone for some computational assistance, things like that. So loads going on there.
How heavy are these? Are they solve sort of weight and battery life type problems on these sort of products? Because these, you need a fair lump of lithium to keep something going for a reasonable amount of time, I'm guessing.
Indeed, which is why the things on the right, I think they are more for work applications, gaming, and occasional use, because they'll have much more processing power, they'll have better optics as a result, but you won't want to wear them all day, and you will want to be able to plug them in, or some of them tether to phones or battery packs and all sorts of other things in your pocket, just for exactly that reason. The one in the middle, because it has limited utility value, it can actually run on its own with a battery, because you're going to use that for a couple of hours, 3 hours on a bike. It will probably draw less power because the optics will be more straightforward. It's more kind of text-based and telemetry-based rather than full 3D, full graphical, immersive content. So yeah, and that feels like a more sensible use, certainly for now. I actually done a bit of a focus on Nreal for precisely the reason that you asked for, is because this is 88 grams, which is still heavier than my glasses, but it's also not a lot. So it feels like you could wear that all day if you had to. It also comes with this little button which accepts swipe input and clicks and things like that. So you don't have to tether to your phone. And it has 3 cameras in it, so it can do all of the environmental detection, plane detection, image tracking, 6 degrees of freedom, all by itself. And these you can buy now as a developer, and they'll be a general release within a year, I think.
How much?
It's about $1,100 for the developer kit, so I'm assuming the consumer version will be less.
Okay, it's not too bad, is it?
Which isn't actually ridiculous. I think that, I mean, the things that you can already buy now, you're talking between 500 and 700 for most of them, and they will have less utility value. They'll have less processing power than things like just the cycling one. They're about 500, I think. And the screenshot on the bottom right, you can see kind of what it would look like. It's reasonably vivid, it's colorful, but it's got a slightly holographic quality to it. And what they haven't done there, they've just given you a planet, which looks fine, it looks fun, but that's not really tied into the surroundings, because that's still the biggest computational challenge, is making something look convincing as part of the world around you. You want it to be on the tabletop, not floating above it, or worse, inside the desk. You don't want feet cut off and things like that. So that whole kind of detailed understanding is still the hardest part. And that's where the hardware has got to improve, because software just can't do it. It's just not the right solution, I think.
One of the problems with the VR when it first came out was that you just basically feel a bit sick if you used it for too long. Are we going to see similar things here?
It depends who you talk to. Some people have said, yeah, you know, I've used it for an hour and I didn't want to puke, which is great. But yeah, it does vary. And I think you're right. Some people just won't get on with it. It also depends on what kind of technology you use. This picture down the bottom is, I think, what Nreal use, which is planar waveguide. And that's basically a bit like, I don't know if you ever remember Pepper's Ghost, but it was basically a Victorian trick with a mirror at 45 degrees and a light behind it, so that you would just see this sort of ghostly hologram appear in front of you. And it's basically the same thing, just a lot smaller. It means that the projector can be either side of your eyes and then almost kind of come out 90 degrees and then back in, which also means it's going to be, the lens is going to be polarized, it's going to have darkness to it, it's going to, there's all sorts of things they've got to think about to get that right. And I think it's a while before they'll get it all right. They'll need to be able to adjust for different people, color blindness, different kind of optics, different shapes of eyeball, all that sort of thing, which is also why the field of view is, you know, they're doing 52 degrees and they've done well at 52 degrees. We have 75 degrees binocular and about like 110 degrees peripheral. So there's a long way to go to fill, you know, what we can see. And also the vertical is much narrower as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of disorientation and a lot of like travel sickness almost, which they will overcome. I'm sure they won't leave it. So a few stats in no particular order, but Pokemon Go is the darling of AR with 3.6 billion in revenues, and 1 billion downloads, of which more than half apparently are still active daily, which is massive for one game. These are the kind of opportunities for advertisers, of course, but also for other developers. A slightly less tasteful statistic, the Pokemon Go death tracker, which looks for various news articles and things like that to corroborate what it believes to be 21 deaths and 60 injuries directly attributable to the use of Pokemon Go. There was also a study in Tippecanoe, Indiana, which half of all traffic accidents were attributed to Pokemon Go. And they reckoned if they extrapolated that for the whole of the US, that would equate to 200 deaths and $7 billion worth of damage, which I thought was quite fun. So AR games themselves on pace for $2 billion nearly in 2020. Enterprise spending was $5 billion last year and is on track for $18 billion. They think that it might be as much as 300 or 400 billion is the value in the next couple of years across licenses, advertising, everything to do with AR. It's going to be pretty big. Snapchat's 186 million daily users, 70% activate an AR lens. So that's most users, and they're not all under 30, as it turns out. This is anybody is discovering this stuff. It just takes a little while longer. In the same way, my mum eventually discovered emojis, and I wish she hadn't. Older people are slowly but surely picking it up, and I think eventually everybody will use it in one way or another. And that is why 2/3 of media planners and buyers do see AR as part of their portfolio now. So we're seeing all the big brands in the last couple of years almost every retailer, fashion brand, sports brand, are all looking at it. It's a big thing for movie launches. It's a big thing in gaming. A lot of people want to do something with AR now because it's experiential. It's not just a moving advert. It's much more experiential and draws people in, gets people talking about it a lot more than they would if they just saw a poster for a movie. If you can say, did you know that you can get Spider-Man to crawl up your front door? People will go, really? I'm going to get the phone out and do it. And it seems to generate more of that sharing and conversational side of things.
I have to admit that living wine labels thing that I put on LinkedIn really got me, because it's just
terrific.
So simple, but now I pretty much buy that brand, by default, because I just like showing it off when I'm around someone's house. Well, not frequently in the last few months, but fundamentally, it's a nice gimmicky thing, and I'm a geek.
Yeah, it's terrific. It's terrific. One of our technology friends and partners have done a thing with, I think it was Moonpig, where a whole range of their cards could be used as visual triggers. So the card arrives, if you download the app, you can hold it up, and the card will come to life.
Brilliant.
Mark, can I? Robert Marcus here, good evening. Thank you for this. I'm just fascinated by this half of all traffic accidents. Is this because people are using it when they're driving, or they're walking along and walk into cars because they can't see them, or how does this work?
I will gladly dig out the article that I pulled it from, but yes, my understanding is it's no accident they picked on Tippecanoe, Indiana. I don't want to sound prejudiced, but I imagine, yes, that there's an increase in traffic accidents as a result of the launch of this game. So
it's one of those very useful to extrapolate type stats, though, isn't it? There's probably 3 people in Tippecanoe, Indiana, and only one person got into a fight, something like that. Interesting, though. It is interesting.
Indeed.
It's a dumb way to die.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
Chasing an alien through a field.
So this is, obviously this is an IT group, so I figured I should put at least one slide in about what it means to everybody rather than just for fun. There are a few things that came to mind. It's hard to really define it in detail, but certainly from a platform perspective, that's where I've seen most activity. We've got Sumerian as a creative content platform. We're seeing the Azure spatial anchors, which are about creating information which is geospatially permanent and can then later be discovered and found and shared and all this sort of thing with a degree of geospatial accuracy. Google have the equivalent called cloud anchors. There is storage, CDN edge computing, which also flows into the 5G, the network part as well, because a lot of this stuff, we're talking 3D, we're talking about scripts, we're talking about audio. It's quite a payload, especially if you don't want people to have an app already downloaded, if you want people to do this on the move. So you do need the low latency. You need to be able to synchronize audio on the device to a screen that's not connected to the phone directly, using the right kinds of triggers. So the latency, the edge computing, CDN is all an issue. I think we're going to see a lot more of it in communications and video conferencing. And I think we need to look at the security of these devices, because the first generation of Internet of Things obviously got burnt for that. The security wasn't really much of a thing, and you could buy internet connected toys that had no security whatsoever and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's all kind of all manner of things to consider there. I think the hardware itself is going to undergo a lot of improvement. So there's going to be 2 or 3 iterations of hardware, which again, from a supply chain point of view, things don't normally need replacing as quickly as this will, but I think things will be made redundant extremely quickly at the moment. There's going to be a lot of uses for inventory management in the supply chain. There's going to be data viz. There's going to be implications on programmatic and all the other ad platforms. I think there's going to be a lot of uses in training and in field service. So, yeah, I think it's going to permeate quite a bit of the supply chain at various levels. Has anybody come across augmented reality yet in their work?
was just thinking at EDF. So obviously we've got, I'm not there anymore, but we did have, people can read their bills by pointing their camera at the meter, and it obviously interprets the figures and all that sort of stuff. That doesn't necessarily class as augmented reality, but if they overlaid an image on the meter to say, this number means this number means this, I suppose that is, isn't it? In a very small and simple way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I have been involved in an AR project. How funny. Didn't realise.
Okay. Has anyone demand for it or any?
Sorry, Mark, apologies if you were covering it. I got dragged onto a phone call with Jaguar, who were trying to sell me a car despite me telling them they can't make a bloody quality car to sell. In terms of AR, it was quite interesting. About, 6-7 years ago, would have been 2013 actually, so 7 years ago. Cisco took me into a demonstration of some work they were doing with B&Q, where they would work on a development of a product for B&Q out in a factory in China. The B&Q staff over in Eastleigh, over AR, would be able to look at that product and walk around it, admittedly using screens rather than headsets, but could walk around it like that, which is quite interesting. Bang & Olufsen have a fantastic application if you're thinking of buying their products, where you can take it to your room in your house. You can select a product, a B&O product. You can place it in the room. You can have as many as you damn well like. My daughter thought I'd gone mad spending money on £90,000 speakers, which I hadn't. I sent her a picture saying, "Hey, darling, look at this." But you can walk around the product in the room. You can see what it would feel like, and you can then even start making it play music as well, which is quite interesting. So I've seen an amount of VR going on, very much in the product development and the marketing world. But at the moment, not with the glasses. You're just doing it on a tablet, on a tablet you can carry around the object.
For now, yes, absolutely. And personally, my feeling is that it will stay that way for a while. I think there's going to be a lot of specific use cases for glasses and headsets and stuff, which you'll put on for an hour or two at a time. Industrial applications, training, that sort of thing, gaming. But I don't see people wearing them all day, every day for quite a while. I think you'll take your phone out and consume things like that way. So you might have missed the slide actually, but I did have a couple of shots of IKEA. They also did the same thing. And I think it was Nike that did the shoes. So you can hold it up to your feet, you can choose your shoe, choose the color. But the real benefit is that it can measure your foot and tell you exactly what size you need within a half to a half size, which actually reduced the cost of returns. It reduced the levels of returns and actually got a return on investment because people were returning less shoes for being the wrong size. So it's as I said on the slide, it's more than a gimmick. But the
you for virtual run as well, brilliant.
Yeah, because you can see if the sofa really is too big for the room. But what interests me even more is when you get specific use cases like the speakers, and you can use it, and it can measure the room, and it can say these speakers are too big for the room. You don't need to buy the biggest, most expensive speakers; they're too powerful, or they need to be further away from the wall because of the bass response. They can use it to optimize, calibrate is the word I'm looking for, calibrate your surround sound and things like that by looking at the shape of the room and all that sort of stuff.
I've actually looked at replacing our office in the past when Halo Lens was launched previously, or the first iteration of it, whereby you could essentially put your monitor or multiple monitors. So in the managed service space, you're monitoring various things, networks, traffic, tickets, the typical sort of service levels, tickets and things like that, where we could ultimately have multiple screens shared across various technicians and obviously salespeople as well. And you could essentially just replace a significant portion of an office space, for example, with an AR-based space of some kind. So we were looking at it to reduce office space. Primarily, that was one of our goals.
Sure, and I'm a long way from being an expert in physical networking, but it strikes me that on-site diagnosis, there are applications there because your whole network topology and stuff can all be in the device. You know, not carrying the paperwork with you. You don't have to have the laptop next to you. You can just, go in and diagnose on site and things like that as well.
To see into trunking without having to remove it all,
Exactly.
It's got so much, benefit to network engineers. To look at a network switch, or some of the cabinets that you see with that look like spaghetti junction, and to understand exactly where the ports are and what they're leading to. I think that there's significant user cases there in the future.
Well, indeed, IBM are doing this now with their technical support offering, where customers can have an IBM app on their phone. They can walk into the data center or the rack. They can point it. The phone will then tell them exactly which unit to go to. It will show them how to unclip it and pull it out. It will show the customer how to take the top off, all by looking at the image, the video on the phone, and take them through the repair action.
As long as you've got 3 hands.
Well, you can have a glamorous assistant, can't you?
Yes, I mean, as we talk about it, there's actually quite a lot we can do with this, isn't there? It's not just a marketing thing. It's just you've got to think of it differently, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm thinking there's some research stuff we could do in there as well. So I work in market research, and quite a lot of the time we're asking, as part of our concept tests, what do you think about these things? And being able to walk a client into a restaurant layout with all of the things, and really get a sense of how they feel about it is quite exciting to us.
Are you using it, Mel?
No, we did some work on it about maybe 6 months ago and came up with a prototype. But at the time, we didn't have any clients who were particularly engaged in that. Whereas now we've got a different group who I'm quite excited about being able to talk about this with. But we've got some other things to get on the roadmap first.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Mm.
There you go, Mark.
Yeah.
You have a job for a while yet.
Mark, it's Andy. Sorry, I had to just duck off then. Excellent presentation. I sort of work in security, and I had a global cybersecurity company until Christmas last year. Unfortunately, I've sold it for this purposes. But we looked at augmented reality with our developers in the SOC, because typical SOC would have probably 15 to 30 people working across different shift patterns. If it's a reasonable size, and what we were able to do is give them I don't know if anybody's been to BT Tower. I used to work for BT, like a big broadcasting studio. So you could give them all these different screens they could look at, and then just touch in the air with a glove on, and then drill down into that to get different views. So we played with it, and we were going to go down that route. But as I said, I sold it to the investors. So, but we were definitely interested, because I think it could make stuff quicker for our clients as well, and we could interact with the client on the other end. So yeah, fantastic.
So, Andy, in that case, because obviously Nick's been looking at the same sort of thing as well.
Yeah.
How do you calculate the ROI? Because I can imagine that's not a cheap project to engage in.
No. So we weren't really worried about ROI, to be honest with you. We were looking at for sustained differentiation on our roadmap. So not everything about saving money, and it was giving the clients. Our view was to give the clients a better service level with us, and be able to get to the problems quicker. So it wasn't an ROI case. We went into the budget with quite a substantial budget, but when I say substantial, I think it was about 1.5 million, and we were a 35 seat business. So we put a lot of cash ready to go, but it wasn't ROI. It was all about having sustained differentiation in our product roadmap going forward. And what we'd like to have got to is, even if everybody's in the cloud, there's still people a lot which are on-prem. You still get, I know all IT people in this call and procurement people, but user to get PC problems, you could actually put an AR set at the other end, and then tell them how to unplug routers and do certain bits and pieces in an emergency situation. That's where we were going with it.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah, but thanks so much. Really interesting.
I don't know if it's quite the same thing. We're doing a bit of work with people who are using these glasses for fixing tanks when they're out in the field. So if the tank breaks down, having to get it on a transporter and try and get it back to base costs a fortune. But if you can send all the all the documentation that goes around the bit of the tank that they need to get fixed, and the guy's got the glasses and it all gets fed back, and you can actually get hold of the specialist to talk, using the standard voice call to him dynamically out in the field. The return case on that is immense.
That's it. It's funny because, like I said, I thought this was fairly niche, but it sounds like it's being more broadly used or considered than I actually realised, which is quite cool. And I suppose as the cost of the kit and the software gets better, all those things come down. The cost of entry is a lot lower. It makes it easier to start using it on a broader basis. Mark,
I think it is about finding applications where there's actual real return to it. I think a lot of gimmicky stuff, I don't think that's really going to fly. It's a bit like 3G glasses on tellies, isn't it? Never really got there in the end.
Yeah. Mark, have you got any more slides, mate? I can't remember.
Just a little bit about me and about Darabase, just the plug if there's time, but it's not. I think that was the main body of it.
Yeah, no, I think I'm
looking for some demos. There was a couple of videos that I thought might be really good, but I can't now find them. Or I could do a live demo. I could try a live demo.
That's brave. Give it a go.
Be brave, yeah.
Live demo. Go on, everyone wants a laugh this time of night.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
I just downloaded the PC World app, and that's I've had coffee makers on my desktop.
Oh wow! Have they actually got it already rolling?
Yep, you can look through anything they've got. It's really cool. Point and pick, I think they call it.
PC World app, John. Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be the next iteration of our e-commerce store by the sounds of it then.
Yeah.
Point and place, I apologise.
I'm going to put a Hoover on my desktop.
But it starts to make a lot of sense. If you've got people because of COVID less likely to go out for all manner of reasons, right? Being close to other people, having to stand in a queue 2 meters apart in the rain before you go in, whatever it is, you can really understand the attraction to Curry's PC World, that kind of shop front, as opposed to someone going onto Amazon. I think it's a great idea.
Mm.
Yeah. What they say with technology, animal and children lives.
Say again, sorry, Andy, mate.
I was going to say, what they say, don't work with technology, animals, or children in live situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's it looking, Mark? You reckon you're going to get it going?
Can anyone see my phone on the screen?
No.
I've obviously shared the window instead of the screen. That's my bad. So I share this one. How about now?
Perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. I might have to walk downstairs and show my kids. You know that, don't you?
So you can't hear him, but he's just basically granting a wish. I think the money one is the best one. There's a live forever and go back in time. I seem to remember the money was the best one. It's not quite the same with that audio, unfortunately, but we'll go for the money.
Is this one of yours, Mark?
This is actually some friends of mine at Eighth Wall. But you can throw money around on the floor, and it's all doing plane detection, so you can get up and walk around. And unfortunately, it doesn't know the door's in the way, but it's a small room, so.
That's very cool, though, isn't it? Like you say, the kids go nuts for this sort of stuff.
Yeah, they just do. Yeah.
I might also have this was mine. This was much more straightforward because it only took about 10 minutes, but this was Wilfred's birthday cards. And I Minecraft animals on it for him.
That's cool.
It took 10 minutes. It was no problem. Obviously not 3D, but they do move with the plane of it all.
Problem is, it's disappointing when you give them the real thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, I'm afraid so.
Well, Mark, that was brilliant. Thanks, mate. I mean, like I say, I don't think I quite got my head around how real this is. I thought this was a bit more future than it obviously is, which is quite cool. And I suppose that the key thing is trying to understand how you make commercial cases, or as Andy said, service-related cases, some sort of business differentiation case to support the cost. And obviously, the way things are going, the costs are going to come down probably as quickly as every other consumer device, and this will become a lot more real imminently by the sound of things.
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is going to be driven hugely by industry, I think. In fact, so if I can just, it's not so much a plug, but it's just an interesting slide. I'll skip past me and go on to Darabase. The specific thing we're doing with Darabase is more about the management of rights, whether that's property rights, image rights, and some of the more nefarious things that are going on with AR. So I'll run through a couple of these slides if you don't mind, just gives you a bit more insight. But some of the things that we're seeing already are things like brand damage, pay Trump bribes here. There's another one that simply says shithole. This one, I don't know if you saw this, but this is Burger King. If you show it a McDonald's ad, it sets fire to it and then reveals their flame grilled thing. And
I remember that.
Yeah, but essentially that's brand defacement. If you actually came along and burnt an actual poster, there'd be problems. And we're not saying it's the same, but we're saying it's not okay either. We've got activism. This one here, which is the Lion King over Buck P. That's passing off. There is a suggestion there that the Queen or the Crown endorses Disney products, and given how protective Disney are of their own rights, I think they're a little bit naughty not to ask for permission to do this. This one was actually a Japanese supermarket, which was in the car park of a Carrefour. So you could bowl up to the competitor's supermarket and buy stuff from a competitor and then never go in the shop. So there's quite a few things like that which are quite fun. And so one of the things we've done is we've built this monitor solution, which you can see this is just a couple hundred meter radius from one Black Forest, and you can see all of those pins are all instances of AR activity that they don't know are taking place. Any one of which could be trespass, it could be brand defacement, or it could be an advertising opportunity. It could be positive, it could be negative. And so that's one of the things that we've done is we've started reversing London and major cities to gather some of this intelligence.
Is there a regulatory body for I guess, I mean, I don't know what the terminology is, but I guess like geo caching or geo IP, how is it monitored?
We're using a variety of techniques. So some of it is crowdsourced, some of it is sniffing, some of it is manually entered. There's a whole range of things you can do. Some of it, I mean, people like, there's a social platform called Wallamy. They make it freely available because as far as they're concerned, it's all sharing.
Yeah.
But that's almost like you'd call it a graffiti tool almost. You can leave messages for people and all this sort of thing. But, maybe Buck P doesn't want a giant willy on the top of their building, so they can issue a cease and desist or whatever to try and minimize that. Right. So it is about...
Mark, I think Robert Marcus said I'm probably the only non-technologist. I am a lawyer, and I'd love to just issue cease and desist letters to prevent willies on buildings, so and lions on palaces. So if you've got some nice brand owners who are really upset, then send them my way.
I'll be happy to mention it. I have a feeling we've got a brief exclusivity with Freets because they've helped us out with framing what we can and cannot do. But they're not going to want it all. They're not going to want it forever. But, the more the merrier, frankly.
Brilliant.
On this diagram, mate, all those little pins, are they
individuals
using an application?
No, they're individual instances. So any number of users could be going to those places of interest. And so what we're doing now is we're building a sort of a weighting model into that as well to understand how important it is to the individual game or the individual social experience, and therefore how many people it's likely to attract. We can then overlay with this, we can overlay things like telecoms data. So we're talking to a couple of different people like C.K. Hutchinson about, you know, a mobile network data on top to see how many people are actually hitting these locations. Again, to understand whether it's an opportunity or whether it's a problem, because if you've got people saying, oh, you know, CCTV says this number of people visit, if this number of people aren't buying anything because they're coming and playing a game and disappearing, then that's a value opportunity lost. That is possibly an adjustment required to the rent because the footfall doesn't translate to sales, or it's an advertising opportunity. So there's any number of things they can do with it. But the reason that I wanted to show you this wasn't so much to plug the solution, but just to show how much is already out there. And we have by no means finished. This is just a small example of what we found so far in Blackfriars. Loads of it. When you look under the stones.
Mark.
Yep.
I work with JLL and one of their largest, I guess, underwriter clients.
Yeah.
And they've been investigating, I guess, rudimentarily the possibility of using Wi-Fi to provide them with, I guess, egress data for their retail parks.
Yeah.
So the sort of the basis of it initially was that there are 28 parks that they wanted to understand how many guests were attending these retail parks, so that they could then either essentially put the rates up to Costa, Starbucks, etc., or reduce them, you know, if they were terrible. Is this the sort of like next iteration of that, or is it, you know, does it couple with it? They're looking for innovative ways of understanding that data, so I'm just wondering whether there's an angle.
Yeah, I think so. I think the issue, as I understand it, with Wi-Fi is you've got to get people to connect to the free SSID in the first place.
Yeah.
Whereas I think 5G might be interesting, because if 5G provides a local network, you end up, you know, just automatically being the cell that they connect to when they're in the, so that might be interesting. And also, yeah, we're speaking to the providers, and as long as you know what it is, they can tell you who's been in postcode areas and things like that. Nothing necessarily as specific as a building.
Right.
But if you also know what content is around, then we can get closer to it, because if we know there's a piece of content, we know where that content lives, we know which application it is, which API calls are made, and we can tie that to telephone data. Then we know that users have been in that particular spot, you know, within a meter, which is potentially more interesting.
And I think also target, you know, for argument's sake, there is a Costa or a Starbucks, you're ultimately going to get the augmented billboards in that instance as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just incidentally, if there's anyone that wants to speak to us from JLL, we'd love to speak to JLL, because they've been hard to get hold of. They've been hard to get on side.
Oh, my best mate's the business development director, so, you know.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, we'd love to speak to JLL.
We'll hook up
Obviously,
after this.
our interest in terms of what Darabase is doing, rather than the broader AR community, our real interest is iconic buildings, big retail spaces, all the things that JLL, you know,
represent. Yeah.
So, you know, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's something we can look at after.
So we've got a couple of minutes left, but I think George a bit of a close. Anyone got any other questions, or should we wrap it up? I mean, obviously, Mark, I'm all right to distribute the slides, am I right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Just bear in mind that there are certain images that don't have acknowledgements and stuff, but if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, fine. And I'll put your details.
I can go and find them. I can track them down.
Clearly, there's a lot of people interested, so I'll put your details in the email as well, mate. So, and for the purpose of the recording, if you can just say you are giving me GDPR consent to share your personal details with colleagues, that would be good.
Yes, absolutely. I imagine it's manifestly public at this stage anyway, but that's fine.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. I'll knock some bits up and put it on LinkedIn like I normally do. The next one I'm trying to do, although I haven't quite nailed it down, is drones. Vodafone put some gubbins on LinkedIn last week. So I got in touch with the guy, and I'm going to try and get someone along in September to talk around that, which I thought would be quite interesting. So look out for that. If I fail to do that, I will make something else up.
Do you have someone to speak to, Phil, for that?
Well, like I said, the guy, sort of friend of a friend through Vodafone. If you know someone, mate, I'd be really appreciative.
I know someone who does it for a living, yeah.
Oh, cool. There you go. Even better.
He does random things like flybys and fly-throughs of private jets and things like that for their advertising materials. He does some really cool stuff. I'll mention to him.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, lovely. I mean, yeah, just understanding the commercial and the technical applications of it, that'd be brilliant.
Phil, the other thing is try Consortic. They're based in Whiteley. A guy called Paul Rigby. They're global now in the drone space, working at CA.
Okay.
I'm going to make the introduction for you. So that's Consortic IQ at the end. I'll put it in the chat to you.
Lovely, thanks, mate. That's brilliant.
Okay, no worries.
Cool. All right. So if everyone's happy, I'm going to go and have some dinner because Mrs. Clark's just texted me about a curry that's apparently on the stove. Good to see you all. Ricky, I'll send the details of Debbie, vice versa. And if anyone else wants to volunteer to help Debbie out in making some videos for some local students, she'd be very, very grateful.
I would. Thank you.
All right, guys. Nice to see you all. And September in the Boozer.
Happy days.
Malbecs all round. Catch you later on, boys. Take care, yeah?
Bye.
See you later.
See you later.